Welcome to Four Soundcheck from the heart of Manchester. And we're here to talk about what kind of environment Manchester was, and is becoming for music to support its development, or to support its creation. And I'm here with a whole range of movers and shakers who've either come to Manchester or are from Manchester and the Greater Manchester City region. So I'm just going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. So starting with Egg.
Hi, I'm Egg, and I'm in a band called Porij.
Raheel.
Hi, my name's Raheel. I predominantly work in music and sound.
Excellent. Sophie.
I'm Sophie. I work in the music industry, predominantly in performance, with lots of different clients. For example, things like the Warehouse Project or Glastonbury.
Hi, my name's Ottilia. I run an organisation called Bazaar. We provide development projects for young people, music projects for young people. I also organise a festival called Gobe Fest in Manchester City Centre. And I am the Manchester Hip Hop Archive Education Leader as well.
Okay, beat that, everybody.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm part of Sour Grapes Records and Mars Tapes, the last cassette shop in the UK over in Afflecks, predominantly putting on live music events and releasing bands on tape. DIY scene.
And I'm David Burch, a researcher at an organisation called CLES that is a think tank that works with councils interested in sort of creative economies and also run a record label called Ad-hoc Records.
Thanks, everybody. So I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm going to start with a question for those of you who have come from somewhere else to Manchester. And I'm going to ask the question in this way. So if you're not from Manchester, what attracted you here? And knowing what you know now, would you still come? So let's start with Egg.
I was born in London, and I came to Manchester to study music actually at the RNCM. I was on the pop course. And my sister went to RNCM. She was like, you know what, like, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And she was like, you'd have a great time. I had a wonky tooth. I wanted to be a trumpeter. It wasn't working out. She's like, go on the pop course. Like, you'll have a great time. And then when I came, I didn't realise how much it was going to influence me. Like, the fact that this city has so many venues, especially, like, the smaller ones. Like, when you're starting out, it was so important. We were gigging all the time, and, like, we were able to get on our feet from these venues. And, like, it massively changed me, and it also meant that my band Porij, like, we started here and we grew up here as a band, and it literally influenced us hugely.
So I was born in Nottingham actually, and I wanted to study music in Leeds, but me and my parents settled on studying economics in Manchester.
It's a funny compliment.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm honestly glad and blessed it worked out the way it did. But my sister was also studying in Manchester, so I kind of felt there was a bit of a comfort zone, a support bubble. But yeah, no, I mean, when I came into the city, it was just, I guess first year you think you've seen everything, and it was just Oxford Road that I'd seen, and I was like, oh, Manchester's great. But even now, I mean, that was 10 years ago, I still feel like I'm discovering more and more, really. So.
Would you do it again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So Sophie, you're from Manchester. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which is, I mean, if you were not from Manchester, then what would you think is the uniqueness of the city?
It's hard for me to imagine not being from Manchester. I went to Leicester.
Maybe that's the uniqueness.
Well, I went to Leicester Uni for a year, and I was like, what is this? Where the hell where am I? Like, because something that you said, like, they had 2 live music venues, and on a Wednesday night you listen to rock, and I was like, what do you mean? I think that's one of the beauties of coming from Manchester, and I said this in an interview recently, like, you can wear Air Max and a pair of flares, and you can go to a hip-hop night, and the next night you can go out in a leather jacket and listen to a Susie and the Banshees, like, post-punk pop, like Apollo, like anything, basically. You can do anything. There's a mix match of everything and anything. But I think what is the amazing thing of it, it's the DIY culture of it. And it's the fact that everybody says, like, it's really overused, but we do things differently here. It's not we do things differently. It's like anything is possible with we were the place for the first vegetarian society. So like that's a reason to come, surely. Like
Let the people know.
yeah, it is. It's interesting, you know. It's interesting, isn't it? So I think it's a reason to come here is that it's full of makers, and anything is possible. Yeah.
Ottilia, you probably came furthest, I think.
Yeah, I came from Transylvania at the age of 12, not to Manchester, but I moved to Buxton. I was a refugee and moved to Buxton from Romania. And then chose Manchester to come to university, well, Salford University. Because the course at Salford University was really cool, media and performance. But also I had an alternative reason. I started raving at the age of 15, and I thought, I really want to do a jungle night. And Manchester looked, you know, this was great because this is where we used to come and buy our tickets to the raves at Spinning or Eastern Bloc. And all the DJs were from here, and I was just fascinated by Manchester. And whilst at uni, I started organising the jungle night. I had no idea how to put on events, but there was already such a supportive environment. There was a lot of talent. You know, I'd go to the record shops, ask them how to do stuff. They would tell me the venues. At first, it was quite hard to find a venue because at the time they were like nobody would want jungle at their venue.
You had on your license how many beats per minute you were allowed to have in that venue.
Yeah, so people didn't like the idea of jungle at the time, but from one venue it went to another venue. So I remember Debbie and Pete who ran Pressure, which it's called Club Havana, and it turned into Pressure, and I don't know what it's called now. But they were really supportive. And they had ideas. So as a young person, there was so much support, I think. And even Tony Wilson, you know, Tony Wilson came into the record shop and said, I want my son to be to do work experience for a jungle night. And who's that girl that does Squiggly Mash? And then I'd meet with him and he'd come along. So there was support from everybody, from the venue to the doorman, you know, to Manchester's established music business, music industry. I felt that there was a lot of support. And I'd definitely come here again. Definitely.
Thank you. Alex, I don't even know whether you are from Manchester or not, actually.
I'm not from Manchester. I'm a bit of a mix. I'm originally from the Middle East. I was born and raised in a place called Sharjah in the UAE. And I kind of, spent all my teenage years out there. And there's not much of a scene out there, for obvious reasons, I suppose. So I always wanted to move to Europe and move to a kind of a big English city that was affiliated with music to try and actually get into the scene, because I've always been a indie rock, garage rock kid growing up. So as soon as I got the chance to go to uni, I ended up in Wales in the middle of nowhere, which wasn't great. So as soon as I left there, I came to Manchester and met the guys at Sour Grapes and formed a label together as soon as we could. So,
wow. Okay. So it just happened like that.
Pretty much, yeah. I wouldn't say like that, but it's like
well, sort of like a long click.
A long kind of click out of the desert. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. I know you're a Londoner, so we're always, born and bred Mancunians. We're always happy when Londoners come here because it proves our superiority, obviously. So, is that your belief as well?
Yeah, I was just sort of at school thinking about where to study afterwards, and it wasn't necessarily the sort of bands that you think of, like Oasis, that I was into. It was more kind of Mr. Scruff, and I heard the Chemical Brothers met here at the university, and I thought, well, makes sense. I'd love to go to that place, and haven't left since. I'd like Raheel, actually. I studied economics, and find it interesting actually that you'd think economics and music and creativity, they're so sort of different, but of course there's a huge economic value of music and culture, and I think maybe the organisations of the city that rely on this huge stream of students that come here and actually make the scene vibrant, they need to recognise the value to the brand of Manchester that they bring, and try and have more joined up working to try and make more success and pour all the resources that they do have as universities, as councils, as educational establishments into harnessing the sort of economic value of that creativity that students bring.
Well, that kind of brings us to our next question, really, which is around what infrastructure there is that has survived? You know, what infrastructure has survived the pandemic, and you know, what should be there, and who are organisations like GMCA and, you know, Arts Council England, are they putting their money in the right places? So, I mean, I don't know whether you and Alex want to lead off on that one, and then we'll come to Raheel in a minute.
Yeah, I suppose first of all, it's the fact that there's like huge inequalities in where investment goes in the UK in general, but also especially to do with culture. And I mean, I don't know the details, but from what I hear, the Arts Council do some good work around sort of getting funding to groups that haven't been engaged as much in culture. But it should be seen within the context that a lot of this funding comes from central government, and it's just been massively hit, local government especially, by austerity. So, you know, yeah, if levelling up is to mean anything beyond an empty slogan, it needs to be sort of well-resourced and properly financed.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, you found a niche, at least for what must surely be the most niche technology in music. So, but I mean,
there was kind of a small economic idea behind it, because when we opened up the first cassette shop, obviously it was a bit of a gimmick idea. There's no other cassette shops in the UK right now, so it was kind of it's something interesting, something new. But we were surprised to see how it took off, because there are a huge collection of kind of DIY small bands that realise that if they put a small cassette out and sell it for £8, they're going to make more money than they'd ever do in a year's worth of streaming in most cases. So although it seems like an outdated technology, it is kind of combating the rubbish streaming rates that you also see, which is one of the main reasons that we keep doing it and keep trying to do as much as we can.
Thanks. And Raheel, just turning to you as the other qualified economist in the room, I mean, would you say that the infrastructure that gets young artists, offers them opportunities, perhaps people like yourself who are active in lots of different, you know, genres, across genre and so on, would you say that that infrastructure still exists in the city? Is there enough? What would you say?
To be honest, I can only speak from my personal lived experience, and it feels like the more applications I put in, the more chance of success I have for getting some kind of funding for a project. It feels like that's literally what it feels like to be an artist at the minute. I don't know if that's Manchester, I don't know if that's UK. Okay. It feels like we definitely live in a kind of ecosystem of public funding, really, whereas other countries might sort of differ for good or for bad.
Do you think that's changed in terms of genre, for example? We're going to talk about cross-genre stuff in a minute, but do you think it's changed in that you know, it used to be that if you were a classical musician, you'd put in an application to Arts Council for something, and then if you were an indie rock musician, there's no chance in hell that you would, you know, put in an application. Has that changed now, do you think? Or?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I guess the way there's organisations like Help Musicians, and what's the other one? NP. I don't know what it's called, but I feel like we've spoken about it. No.
I mean, PRS.
PRS, sorry. Stuff. There you go. So I feel like maybe it's more varied than it was before.
Yeah. I mean, Ottilia, you were talking about what it was like to just start a night, you know, a jungle night, and you've found some people, you know, you found a place and you went to...
And after that, I ran a recording studio for 12 years, Gorsel Studios, where a lot of young people had free studio time. And those young people are now in music careers, you know, whether it's not broken English.
Levels.
Yeah, a lot of them either taught there, giving back to the community. You know, Mr. Fox was one of the facilitators. Basically, young people could come in and get 10 hours free studio time in a youth-led recording studio from professional engineers. And a lot of them have gone on to putting records out. JSD I was thinking of, or there's so many bands in my head, bands and all genres, so not genre specific. There was rock bands, there was grime artists. And a lot of them are in successful careers either as artists or some of the surrounding music business jobs, you know, doing something creative, set up their own music video companies, something like that. That facility was absolutely vital, and I think that Manchester needs a lot more of those facilities where young people can learn from, you know, make noise, whether it's a rehearsal room or a recording studio. I don't think there's enough of those.
I guess it plants that
spaces.
seed, doesn't it? And then you just see that grow over time.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, free studio time is really
And
important.
there's no youth centres. So lots of the projects that Ottilia and I both worked on at Unity Radio, where we'd take a double-decker bus on a Friday night at 11 o'clock at night into deepest, darkest Oldham, and sometimes get the kit robbed at gunpoint. Yeah. But it did happen. And take MCs.
It's not all bad in Oldham, folks.
Not all bad, but it did happen on several occasions. But the thing is that I have an issue with this is access. And yes, if you have the ability and the language and the education and the class, because there is still a class system in this country, and it is very, very prevalent. If you have the ability to write those applications and to even know where to begin to find those applications, yes, you can access that government money. But if you don't have those skills, or if you're not what they're looking for at that time, then, you know, you can go ahead. And that comes from me personally as someone who massively suffered during the pandemic. Financially, will I ever recover? I'm not sure I will. But, like, for me personally, like, I wrote probably about 50 applications during the pandemic. And for some people I'm seeing at the top of the industry, I have incredible clients, I didn't even get an answer back on several occasions. And that's, for me, soul destroying. How does that feel for somebody starting out? And I just don't, that is my major concern, because a lot of the Arts Council money that we currently have is cultural recovery. And that is big businesses who are getting that money because otherwise their company will go under. But is there still the support for smaller businesses? Is there still the support for youth education there? Because there's been so much that is around supporting the economy and so much around keeping these already businesses. I am a bit concerned about the people that are beneath that, or the people that you think are all right, you know. It's huge. And that's my concern, is like, yeah, if you've got access to a computer, yeah, if you've got access. And the government that we are currently under has removed all of the youth centres and built these supersized youth centres that are only 3 of them in the whole of Manchester. And how do you get there if you've only got a fiver to live off a week? How, you know, for me, there's a lot of barriers there.
And sometimes it's not just youth, you know, some young people wouldn't even go to a youth centre. Yeah. But as a Manchester calling itself a music city, music capital of the North, we should have some music centres that are accessible, you know, young people's music centres in various different spaces.
Intergenerational music centres.
That too, yes, that's one of the questions.
Like, we're a community, we're a village, we're just a big village. Like, you learn from elders. There's such a segregation of that.
That sort of leads me nicely onto the next sort of question, which is, you know, we talk a lot, I think, or people in this city, or these cities, I should say, because I work at Salford University, that we talk a lot about how unique this city region is in terms of its scene, because all sorts of people mix together, and you get cross-genre stuff, and you get cross-community stuff, and you get well, I'm not even sure you do actually get cross-generational stuff. Do you think we do get cross-generational stuff?
100%.
Well, that's nice to hear, but I mean, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just me who's not I'm an old fogey, so, you know.
No, I mean, I feel like one of the most beautiful things about Manny is that the music community is so not petty and so supportive. And, like, I remember when I came here, like, I didn't know anyone. And, like, there'll be times where, like, I remember I was going for, like, a rehearsal in the Mill at Wellington House. I didn't know which room I was going to. I actually walked into, like, a levels room. I was like, sorry, do you know how I get to this room? Totally sent me in the wrong direction. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's so much support, and, like, everyone goes to everything. Like, Fox will come out to a gig where there's probably, like, 50 people in the room, and he'll be the loudest one in the room supporting. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like everyone is learning from each other. It's not just, you know, like, the elder people, you know, just giving their wisdom to the younger people, but it's like so appreciated across all of it. I just think that's amazing, especially because like all these grassroots venues are like, you know, they make bands, like they make artists, and the fact that Manny has so many is incredible. But also, tragically, they're fighting for their lives, obviously. Like, the stuff at night and day, you move next to a music venue, don't complain if there's noise. Like, it's really frustrating. But, yeah, I think it's totally cross-generational. Like, the community is so strong.
And that's coming back to what I was saying before about the access to funding. And I know Ottilia will totally echo this. We've had this conversation many times. It's like, sometimes the funding always goes to the same people, or funding will come out from the Arts Council and it's like, we want to fund this project. So these people who already have loads of money create a project that gets the money again. And you're like, why isn't the Arts Council walking round finding those people that are already making this stuff and going, here's a pot, you're making some really cool stuff, here's a pot of money for you. Because that's the bit, you know, like, get out there, Arts Council, get out there, government, find those people that are making.
Because also, I'm not going to lie, it's not going to be hard. No. Walk into any gig venue and you'll find some of the best music you've ever heard. And so varied, like, that is another great thing about Manny. Like, we were booked for loads of different types of gigs. No one knew what genre we were. I don't know what genre we are. But, like, the fact that we book for jazz gigs, we book for indie gigs, we book, like, there's so much going on in this city. And, like, people like Shel Zenner will be out there and she'll be at 3 gigs a night and she'll know exactly what's going on. But, like, if the Arts Council literally just, you know, stepped out, like, it's so easy to find. There's so much going on. It's so rich in culture and it's so rich in creativity and music. It's like, it's in front of you.
I mean, we're always having to try and justify what we do as, you know, in terms of the positive effects, you know, in music. And Raheel, one of your interviews, I noticed a striking phrase. You talked about music being the glue. And I wonder whether you thought that was actually kind of like in social terms, as well as I think you were just talking about actually kind of like a project, you know. How, you know. But do you think music can be a kind of social glue?
I think music informs so much more than any form of academia, really. You were talking about wearing certain things and fashion, like it informs fashion, it informs your just beliefs around politics. It can also, like, for me personally, it's kind of changed my view on religion a little bit as well, so it can act like a glue. You just have to open your ears, really, and go and listen.
Yeah. Do we think that music is social glue? Because, you know, maybe that's
it can be anti-social glue as well. It's not always...
So let's talk about money. The pandemic and the last 2 years have probably been the worst 2 years for musicians, people in the arts generally, in creative sectors. I mean, has there been anything that's good that's emerged from the pandemic that you can point to? Maybe start with Dave, I don't know.
I think it's sort of exposed a lot of things and shone a light on issues. It shone a light on the fact that if you're a musician making a living, it's from lots of different revenue streams, and some pay, and it's only until the pandemic, when all of them were stripped away other than digital streaming, that they realised that actually you get very, very little from this on the whole. Like, just by way of example, you know, if we were to put out a release and spend like £1,000 on it, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things is quite modest when you're thinking about all the different elements you might need, PR, radio, you know, making content, you're going to need about like hundreds of thousands of streams to just break even, let alone, you know, make a profit. So it's kind of exposed that on the economic side. I think people need to think about the ownership and how they manage their rights of music going forward if you do make music. And it's also exposed the need to have a really strong team around you and support network to kind of advise you on these very complicated ways that music flows through digital rights.
And Alex, I mean, you've found a kind of unique solution to this problem in the revival of the cassette tape. have you found that people wanted something a bit more concrete, you know, during when everything was digital, you know?
Yeah, in a way, as you were saying, it did kind of bring, when you realise that only digital is left, a lot of people are realising the value of physical formats, and a lot of people don't like to put any value on cassette tapes for obvious reasons, the quality and stuff, but it was something that bands could take away and that people could go and purchase the bands. I mean, I do think that the pandemic has made music kind of more valuable in people's eyes, because for some of the first gigs back after the pandemic were some of the busiest I've been to in a long time for small level bands. So I think, on the whole, people realise that it could slip away, and that it's something that people want to hold on to. And I think in the way that's my takeaway as a good side of the pandemic anyway.
But wasn't it so frustrating at the beginning, because the arts didn't get any funding, like theatres didn't get any funding for ages. It's like everyone's getting through this pandemic when we're all in lockdown. What are you consuming? You're consuming the arts. That's how you're keeping sane. Are we getting any support? We're not getting any support. So it just seems crazy that even happened, and that's still happening, you know?
Yes, and of course there's a big difference between being a freelance artist and creator and being somebody who works for an organisation where they could have been furloughed and so on. You know, there was
that has created again such a further class divide for people. And you've seen things like the Stagehand Fund and things like that have developed out the back of that, you know, because there was so many industries, yes, the music industry, but so many industries that are attached to the music industry. So you've got like the hospitality industry, which is still hugely in a big old mess, do you know what I mean? And then also things like the production and technical industries, you know, like people who are used to touring, and double that with Brexit as well. People who still are now in limbo, visa limbo, you know, there's so much else that's been attached to this. And I think one good thing that did come from the pandemic is everyone needed a bit of a break, which I don't know about anyone else. Like, I was operating at a ridiculous level pre-pandemic. I mean, 70 to 90 hours a week, literally ridiculous level pre-pandemic. So I think it's hugely done good for people's well-being in a lot of senses of like, but I think a lockdown for artists, especially mental health, you know, sadly we've lost quite a few of our friends during this time, and it's been really difficult because those people were like used to being on a stage and used to hundreds or thousands of people every week being like, we love you, you're amazing, you changed our lives, and then all of a sudden they're in a flat on their own. And you know, so I think economically it's changed stuff, but I just think we still need to give each other time to breathe and be kind. I think that's massive, isn't it? Like, so important. But just like every industry's been hit. I wouldn't want to be the one handing out the checks.
No.
You know, that's the...
If you're a performing artist, and I'm looking at Egg and Raheel here, you know, have you had a sense that things are returning to an even keel, at least in this city, at least?
No one was coming to my gigs before the pandemic, to be honest, so it stayed exactly the same.
Shut up, man.
But I recently went to one of Egg's gigs, actually, at White Hotel, and it was packed, so that's probably a better... You should answer this question.
Oh, no. I don't know. I think, like, it's still super uncertain, and the people that are on my team and people that I'm working with, you know, they've had entire tours being cancelled still, you know. It's still really prevalent. Like, I caught COVID from that gig that you were at, you know. It takes you out. I feel like, yes, there's a sense that it's going back to normal, but equally, you know, it's just the government's chance to go, well, we don't have to give you any funding, but like if you get COVID, that's your fault, innit? Like, we're not going to support you, but you've got to cancel all your tours. You've got to, like, it's ridiculous. And even the fact, like, obviously, like, I'm in a band, we're still pretty small, like, there's no support there, and you just have to give everything you've got. But like, we were offered tours in America, we can't afford that. Like, we'd make such a huge loss. Like, we're fighting to break even on tours that we're selling out. Like, it's madness to even try and, you know, sustain yourself. Like, I'm blessed enough to be, you know, like, my parents are letting me stay in their house. Like, I'm not paying them rent, but if you don't have that kind of support, what are you meant to do? Like, it's exactly what Sophie's saying. It's still so classist. If you don't have daddy's money, what are you going to do? Because, like, at this stage, you've got to throw everything you have at it. Otherwise, you're never going to make it work. But I don't have time for a job. I'm on universal credit. Like, I'm not making ends meet. But people will probably look from the outside and think, oh, you're doing all right.
Yeah.
I'm not doing all right. I'm skinned. Like, I'm barely holding on. But this is a time where you just have to literally fight for it. But where's the support? If you don't know about these kind of funding things, like, what are you meant to do?
I think there's been beautiful support networks that I've seen come out of the pandemic, like really beautiful WhatsApp groups. Like it's really interesting. There's one like from the NTIA and stuff that I'm part of, Nighttime Industry Association. And it's got people of all different levels. It's got people starting out, people who are doing the first ever jungle night, and it's got people who run multi-million-pound companies in it. And you'll see like people reaching out for help, and like that never would have happened before. Like people never would have shown weakness.
It's that transparency, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that has, you know, like people say like it's a bit like being through a war. We've been through a global war. So we need to help each other. And I think the UK has been in a really weird situation because we're going through Brexit.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird.
I totally agree with you. We did an online festival. Well, I organised an online festival when it was the first lockdown because Gobi Fest was meant to happen in June. And then lockdown started in, was it March? So I asked all the people that were booked to perform to do something, to create something. And I was like, whatever you want. You know, some people did it with a professional camera. Some others did it with their phones and sent it in. And that was, I remember being quite exhilarated because somebody sent me, the way they put something together, this band that they couldn't see each other, Transylania. Some of them were in Hungary, some of them were in Romania, but they've put something together and it was brilliant. And it was like being at a gig. I remember with my little baby just dancing at home. And then a little bit later on, we did some gigs at the Wood Rooms, which were more properly streamed, not from bedrooms and put on YouTube, but, you know, more proper streamed DIY still, just with one camera, one sound man. And it was so amazing to see. There's some beautiful moments where, for example, Manchester International Roots Orchestra came along and they haven't seen each other. They were so used to rehearsing, being together all the time, you know, performing every week, and then they haven't seen each other for months, and it was their first performance. And because it was done in a room like, you know, as the Wood Rooms in Salford, but it was just a space, you know, a close space. You could hear a penny drop. It was just beautiful moments, and really, you know, people were in tears from it. And
the amount of times I've cried in the last 2 years, like, you know, putting on gigs or concerts or anything, like opening night at the Warehouse Project, like, I just stood at the back of the concourse with tears just rolling down my face, like watching
capturing those moments
like,
where people re-met
even
again.
now, like watching people re-embrace,
yes.
And it's like, oh.
I mean, what you just described, Ottilia, is it seems to me a kind of new way of you know, a new means of presenting music in a way, or presenting performance. And it leads me on to my next question, which is really about the relationship between stuff that exists online and stuff that exists in the kind of spaces that we've all been talking about, and you've been talking about particularly, like, in the, can we have stuff that is online but is specifically from a place? I mean, I don't know whether you guys, Dave, do you want to answer that maybe?
Yeah, well, the short answer is you definitely can, and I think you're starting to see it emerge now, this kind of hybrid life of digital and in person. It's something that, like, retail understands that's a big thing. The pandemic has shown that workplaces, like, you've got this kind of hybrid working, and I feel like the culture and music, it will be going in that direction. You know, Raheel was talking about that gig that he went to that was great. I mean, what theoretically, like, the cameras could stream that gig, and then, you know, you could be in there and have that amazing in-person experience, but the fans who couldn't make the gig, or even Raheel could like have a copy of that gig after he goes home.
But how do you monetize that? Like, from coming, you know, as a devil's advocate, like, I feel like when everything went online, it was actually pretty brutal because, like, sure, for the beginning, like, that was a little bit of fun, but actually, I just felt like my legs were cut off. Yeah. Like, because it got pretty old pretty quickly. And, I mean, we did a live stream gig, just, like, from a Pirate Studios rehearsal room. But actually, you know, we couldn't hear anyone. Like, there were loads of people on the stream, but it's like, well, we can't interact with you, really. We can't hear what you're saying. And it feels like, I don't know, it's like, I hate the phrase, the new normal. And I just, things being online doesn't make me happy. Like, I hate the fact that I have to be an influencer as well as a musician. Like, it's all this stuff I don't necessarily think personally for me is helping me create and is helping me be a musician. Because, yeah, I just feel like it's not the same performing. Like, when I've done stream gigs or when we've, like, put together videos, it's like, oh, yeah, that's a bit of fun. But, like, it's not the same as being in front of an audience. Like, you can't interact in the same way.
Does everybody else feel that this sort of the new normal or the new sort of technologized, digitized normal is a, you know, second best? I don't know.
I mean, it takes away from the gigs in terms of, like, once you play a performance, you go in and you meet the members in the audience and you sell them their stuff at the merch stands. You know, it's engaging with somebody in a way that you can show them the stuff that you enjoy, whereas if they're online, they, okay, click next, what else is on Facebook and what else is on...
But that's why, like, your thing is, like, so great. You know, the rise of sales in physical music has gone bananas. Like, look at Adele. Adele's taken out all of the vinyl places because the major record labels are like, wow, vinyl's really selling, physical stuff. And it's not just music. Like, the rise in, like, film photography is, like, huge. I know for me personally, it's like, okay, well, I don't really want to look through my camera roll and my photo. Like, I just take a point and shoot everywhere. And, like, having those physical photos means so much more to me. I don't know why, but I just feel like it's the same thing with music and across the arts, really. It's like, I love going to the cinema. Like, I know it's more expensive. I could stream it legally online. I do frequently. But, like, it's just that experience.
I'm sure that's not true, is it?
No.
It'd be super interesting to hear someone from, like, a younger generation or 2 generations away to think about their relationship with the digital world, because I think it's going to change rapidly.
Yeah.
And that's me.
I'm only 23, man. What are you talking about?
No, I'm talking. So I've got loads of nephews and nieces, and obviously come home and they're always just on the iPads and stuff. And how many steps away is that from the whole kind of augmented reality helmet on your head, like that sort of? And I know that's being pushed, but it'd be interesting to see just what happens, really. I think that's good.
VR.
Yeah. It's
Like, Glastonbury did the VR rave. Like, they did it, there was, like, a stream of it. And, like, my mates were, like, laughing because they were in, like, LA and they were like, yeah, I'm at home in my pants. And I'm, like, stood next to somebody and it looks exactly like it should look. And then somebody went up and asked them if they had a cheese sandwich or whatever. And I was a bit like, oh, yes, he's excited. And then there was a thing at the weekend in... DJ Mag or Mix Mag, and it was like, yeah, meta rave, worst event ever. Like, everyone gave it a thumbs down, like all these, like, avatars. But it is interesting, isn't it?
I feel like it won't be for us, but it'll be interesting to
I mean,
see
it
how
is happening. Like,
Yeah,
whether I
yeah,
like
yeah.
it or not, it is happening. The metaverse is
absolutely
going for it. I just know that personally makes me depressed.
But we are sitting in a physical space that you know, which is sort of recognisably Mancunian. Well, it would be if the cameras were pointing the other direction towards sort of uncovered brick surfaces. We're right on Deansgate. You know, you can look out the window and there's people staggering down Deansgate and so on. Right in the centre of Manchester. And obviously, you know, from my point of view, I like being here. I feel very comfortable in my city and so on. But this content is going to be going online, and this is what I'm getting at: is there a way of making content that necessarily goes online sometimes, or perhaps, you know, we're forced to put it online, and have it recognisably contributing to a sense of community, the kind of community and networking that we've been talking about? I don't know whether Whether you think that's possible.
You look at like TED Ed and that kind of stuff, and that is very much an online service, even though they have a massive crowd for most of the talks, but they are predominantly an online service, and you don't think of a TED Ed talk as something you go in person, but of course there is a massive audience there, but I guess it's become such a thing where we just assume a TED Ed talk is something that's online, an online event.
That is so true. I know I've just chatted a lot negatively, but like, I am a complete hypocrite in the sense that I do consume so much online. Like, don't get me wrong, and I learn so much, and I'm influenced so much by online culture, but it's hard to find the balance and find the line with myself and what I'm putting out and what I'm creating and how much time I'm spending online. It's just a weird dichotomy. Like, it feels like they're fighting each other.
But nobody could doubt, for example, that the video that you did, that Porij did for Nobody's Scared, was set in Manchester. If you know the city at all, it's like, I know, you know, every corner of the Northern Quarter is covered by that video, and various other places. I mean, you know, that's the sort of thing I'm getting at. Is this a sort of deliberate sort of rooting of that content somewhere in a particular physical space?
100%. Like, that video was our love letter to Manchester, because none of us are from Manchester, but we all came to this city and we made what Porij is, and like, that is Mancunian. It will always be Mancunian, despite the fact that none of us were born here. Like, Porij will always be a Mancunian band no matter where we are in the world. Like, it's so influenced, and for us, that video, like, we knew we were finishing college, we didn't know where we'd end up. It's like, well, I want to show everywhere that I love in Manchester, and that we'd be fighting over places like, I want the street by soup kitchen, like, and it's just that kind of thing, and like, to place us there in that moment, like, for however long as YouTube exists, you know, people will be able to see the places that we love.
If you wide lens that question, though, that you just asked in your point, to go bigger than that, right? What's the point of knowing where something is, and then the value of it being online? So then we're into NFT realm, aren't we? Because essentially then we're saying, if you were to watch something in New York that's about Manchester, what value does Manchester get back from you watching it in New York? And is that what we're talking about? Is that what we're like? So like, how does the value go back? And then it's like streaming and money and funding and all those things. But that's what the NFT is doing. It's allowing the value to come back to the original people. And that comes straight back to the music world of like, that goes back history of like people making money off something that they didn't actually create. Like,
Dave?
Well, if you think about talking about sort of value in the digital world, it's often like huge global corporates that are extracting value from what you've created. But if you've got something physical, whether it's a tape, whether it's a NFT, I suppose is something physical in terms of it's a line of code that you get money for. I suppose you're able to, even streaming, we're talking about something physical. People filming something at a gig is actually value that is local and stays within a place rather than extracted by a global corporation.
I don't think we are taking advantage enough of, for example, tourism. So somebody watches your video, is a big fan in another country, comes to Manchester and is looking, you haven't got a gig on at the time, let's say, but they're looking for something to do with Porij. Where do they get the merchandising? Where do they visit to see? They can walk down on those streets that they see in the video, but there's absolutely nowhere where they can buy a T-shirt or where they can... And we haven't got a Manchester Music Museum. Liverpool's got it. London's got something similar. I found, because in the last 5 years, I've had about 400 young people come through Erasmus projects from different countries, from 12 different countries. And there's always one in the cohort of 40, there's always one that asks me, where can they go and find something with to do with their favourite band? It could be somebody, there could be somebody who's into DJ Woody, for example, or not necessarily, I can point them towards Salford Lads Club because they've got a room, a Smith's room. But where else they can where else can they find out about the musical history of Manchester? And having been involved with the Manchester Hip Hop Archive now, there was an archive in the library for 3 months, and now we're touring it in some schools. But then what's going to happen to it afterwards? There's nowhere to put all this. And fair enough, we've got the Manchester District Music Archive that's online. That's online. But if somebody comes to Manchester and is a big music fan and wants to purchase something or see something or feel that musical history, where do we find it? We talk about it all the time. We talk about the hacienda and we talk about our history. We don't outwardly share that or make the most of it in sense of tourism. And that could bring in some value back into Manchester and also give value to those people that leave with something, you know. You can point them in the direction of Afflecks, but can't guarantee that they're going to find a T-shirt there.
No, but you will find a tape.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But then
you might do.
Then there's like a real beauty as well in finding the things. Like, I remember you saying you'd been here for a year and you'd only seen Oxford Road, right? So I worked with this Australian girl for like, this is years ago when I was a waitress. And she was like, I'm leaving Manchester. And I was like, why? Obviously, greatest city in the world, are you mad? And, like classic Mancunian. What's happened? There must be something. And she was like, yeah, well, there's just nothing. There's like no nightclubs. And I remember she'd only ever been to like one place, like the Bop. I mean, Ottilia will remember this. It's a very old nightclub. But it's that thing, isn't it? Like, no, but it's that beauty of unlocking the city. And you see that so much in venues like where the White Hotel or Hidden, or you used to see it in like Collider, or what you said about the spinning and those tape shops and stuff. Like, I teach at BIM, and one of the things that my students find hilarious is the fact that, like, I was alive before the internet. And you know, like Saturday afternoon, I would go and sit in spinning for 8 hours and wait for them to play the one track that I had heard 4 weeks ago on a dance floor. Because there was no other way of finding music. Like, that was your... So there is
to discover, but if you're only here for a week or 2 days, you know, and like I say, Liverpool's got 3 museums, or how many? 2 museums. Yeah.
Well, we
need a museum.
We're back to kind of infrastructure, aren't we? But yeah, I mean, and basically, we seemed in this city very happy to flatten, you know, particularly buildings that have particular memories, you know, and are layers and layers and layers of different memories of clubs that have been one thing and then another thing, and you know, I mean, it's quite extraordinary to me that Afflecks still exists.
Yeah,
you know?
we're very lucky that it's still. I mean, it's been taken over by a chain, but the management team try and make sure it's at the part of it is as DIY as possible with no massive brands and stuff like that, which is a real blessing. Yeah.
Just one last question, then. I think we're moving towards our natural conclusion. How do you describe your relationship to the city? Do you say you're Manchester-based? Do you say you're from Manchester? Do you say that you're a Mancunian? What do you say?
It's tricky. I'm obviously not from Manchester, but I feel like in my profession and creatively I am, because obviously, like, I'll always have roots to London, and I've got to be honest with you guys, I'm currently living in London. I know, I'm sorry. It's happening. I'm poor. I'm living with my parents. But Porij will always say that they're from Manchester. Like, I will always creatively have such a wealth of knowledge from this city that I wouldn't have got anywhere else in the world. So, you know, creatively I am from Manchester in a way, you know?
Raheel, how do you describe your relationship with the city?
I guess I've been here just over 10 years, so when I do go to other cities and people ask me where I'm from, I do say I'm from Manchester. And then comes the question, you don't sound like it. And then it's like, actually, I'm from Nottingham, but I've been there for 10 years. Yeah.
I mean, I've got this accent. And I don't think I've got an accent, and you go somewhere else and they're like, we know where you're from. I think I am now at a point in my career where I'm a connector of the city, and I've got a high currency of the city. And I love it when I'm able to work with new talent or help people see their own talent, and be able to know how to connect them with a platform to help them grow. So I'd say I'm part of the fabric of the city. I think that's fair to say. Will I always be here? I don't know. I dream of living on a beach road, but.
Oh, Beach Road?
But
in Chiltern?
No, but yeah.
We all dream of living on Beach Road in Chiltern. I mean, that's...
I suppose I'm part of the fabric. I've tried to leave. I'm not allowed at the minute.
Ottilia, how do you describe your relationship with the city?
I'm a bit of a connector as well, connecting cultures and connecting ages and different genres. I'm definitely an adopted Mancunian. Yeah. Transylvania Mancunian. Yeah. There's not many of us.
Alex?
Very much in line with what Egg said. Creatively, I feel like I'm from Manchester. I've been here about 8 years now. And I've always, growing up, I've always looked for a city where I can kind of get involved with the creative input. And it's the first city that I've kind of gone to and found that I can engage with people that are interested in the same musical interests that I am. And I've never looked back, really.
Yes, I've been here for about a decade now, but strangely, like Raheel, I haven't really picked up any of the accent. But I would describe myself as, an adopted Mancunian, if nothing else, because when I do go down to London, where I'm originally from, I do sort of get annoyed with the place and sort of say, oh, bloody everyone, like, no one talks to you, and oh, it's so expensive down here, so...
Slander, lies!
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a really, really interesting conversation. Well, as for me, anyway, I hope you found it interesting too. I think we've come to some conclusions, actually. I think we could say that we think that working across genres and across generations is really important, that we think that networking is really important, that the supportive community around people is really important, that small venues are really important, that the sense of it being a welcoming city where people can just start stuff and start things. And I guess we feel that, we haven't really maybe just decided that, but it sounds quite positive. I mean, I think, in terms of where we are, where music is in terms of the city. So, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.